Alright, what's going on, y'all? I got a good video for you today. We're going to be comparing Existential Logicism's morality, aka Deterministic Morality, versus moral realism. Okay, so we're going to compare moral codes here. I have a ton of agreement, and we almost arrive at the same conclusions as people like Sam Harris and TJump, but under Existential Logicism, we don't carry the baggage of objective morality because I don't think it's possible. Okay, so we're just going to do some quick rundowns. All of these claims, if you feel like they're just not fleshed out here, they are all fleshed out within the book. And the same thing's true for TJump and Harris. If you don't not familiar with their work, which I'm sure most of y'all are, then you can look them up and familiarize yourself. But I think their viewpoints sort of encompass a large group of people, and so that's why we're going to address it here today. So we'll start with Existential Logicism, Deterministic Moral Forces. We believe in causal compassion, subjective pressure versus objective law. That's the battle here. We don't believe in moral laws. No moral objective duty. Only a reality to understand and use like a tool for good. We understand everything is born from experience. Experiencing beings have preference based on pain, and it doesn't matter if that pain is based in evolution or divine command or what causes it. We can agree it's bad. It doesn't matter if bad is an objective fact in the universe or if it's just a subjective thing that only exists in experiencing beings, because experiencing beings are the ones who are experiencing morality and good and bad. A tree doesn't experience morality. A rock doesn't experience morality, as far as we can tell. Okay, so moving on. Experience is the foundation of everything. It's the first undeniable truth of reality. You cannot deny experience without affirming experience. That's the epistemic refutation paradox. It goes beyond I think, therefore I am, because you don't need the I. It's what the I rests on. It's a subtle change, and it's a slightly more modest claim, and that's where its power comes from. You cannot deny experience without affirming it. That's the epistemic refutation paradox, also known as the paradox of self-refuting subjectivity. And that paradox was reframed in order to use on AIs, which is now called the Achilles paradox. So those three paradoxes are based on the same framing of the epistemic refutation paradox. Now, for things, everything born from within that subjective experience is necessarily subjective itself. You can't base objective facts on subjective things. Okay? So for something to be objective, it must exist outside of experience and interpretation. That's the contingency guillotine. So the way Hume's guillotine works on God, the contingency guillotine works on all objective moral claims, that they require interpretation, aka they're mind dependent, and mind dependent things cannot be objective. And that's why Hume's guillotine works so beautifully. So things must exist outside that experience and interpretation to be objective. The problem is our experience and interpretation are subjective things. So if the only place morals exist in the universe is inside of our subjective experience, they are not objective. Okay, now an example of this, we'll use numbers. Numbers, you may say, exist in our mind, but they're objective. Wrong. Numbers are subjective overlays we use to describe a principle that exists in reality. Even if all humans and all numbers disappeared tomorrow, the concept numbers represent would still exist outside of our minds. That's where morality is different. We cannot point to morality outside of experience. Experience is subjective, aka morality is subjective. Okay, Now, things without minds can't interpret moral weight. I'm sorry if it seems like I'm yelling at you. They don't call me Trip for no reason. Things without minds can't interpret moral weight. Morality only exists when there's at least one subjective mind to interpret it. No minds means there's no subjective being interacting. There's no subjective being interpreting the pain. That means there's no moral weight there. So, and sometimes people try to get around this by saying if you have a zombie grape a brain dead person, does that mean there's no morality there? And they would say if there's a third person observer, they could impose that moral weight. They could say that's wrong, but that still comes from the fact that those things could or may have had minds. Because that third party observer doesn't see a rock rolling down a hill and say that's immoral. So even there, when it doesn't matter what angle you try to impose the interpretation from, it requires the interpretation to exist. That's how you know it's subjective. So a rock experiences no pain. Therefore, there's no moral weight when you do something to a rock. There's no moral interpretation. And there's no moral weight because there's no moral interpretation. No morality without experience. You have to have an experiencing being to interpret pain in order to have morality arise. Because without any experience, then what is right or wrong? It has no meaning. Experience is subjective. Morality is subjective, as we covered. This is a guideline. I'm trying not to repeat too much, but I may do a little repeating here. We can only carry subjective interpretation of objective things. That means we would need a moral law that applies to objects with no minds. That goes into what we were talking about earlier, why morality is not the same as numbers. Because numbers are subjective. The concept they describe exists outside of minds. Let's see. Pain alone can't be inherently immoral. Can't be inherently objectively immoral. Without an interpreter to say it's wrong, can't be objectively inherently moral without an interpreter to say it's wrong. Stop. Types of pain and amount of interpretation, also amount of wrong and punishment, change person to person and society to society. So even though most people believe in objective morality, nobody lives like that because we know it's not true. Supposedly objective societies still follow subjective rules, subjective punishment. There's no inherent law, and we don't even see one really emerging. Everything we could see that we could qualify as an emergent moral law or something leading to that can just be described through evolution or experiencing beings experiencing pain subjectively and then intersubjectively agreeing, hey, we can help each other not feel pain by not doing certain things and helping each other prevent certain other things. So we already live like this. And so let's touch on the trolley problem, which is fully expanded on in the book, but we'll just sort of hit on it here just a little bit. So in the trolley problem, we say there's no objectively right or wrong answer. We just say it's fucked up, okay? And that's enough. We don't need objective moral harm. It's enough that subjective harm exists, because conscious beings intersubjectively agree that sucks. And conscious beings' experience is all we have to go on. If you remove the experience, you remove the subjectivity, you remove the weight of right and wrong. We're rocks, okay? So what we say is, you're not a hero for pulling the lever and you're not a villain, but we understand that there is harm from so many angles there that it's a fucked up situation. We just deal with the reality. And we ask honestly, we say, hey, you're not right or wrong for pulling or not pulling the lever, but upon review and given all the information we have, this was a right or wrong answer, not a moral or immoral answer, but we can get to was it right or wrong if the question is how do we cause the least harm, which is where I would agree with Sam Harris, or how do we impose least on people's will, which is subjective, which is important in existential logicism. There's no free will, there's only determined will. You are your own causal deterministic wave, self-contained, made of an uncountable number of parts and influences, interacting with an outside wave. That's why your choices feel free and unique to you. They're caused, they're not free, but you do have will, because your will is your experience and your subjective reality, and that's what you are, and that's what your choices are. So you are a small wave imposing on the larger wave. That's why you experience will. It's not, free will doesn't exist, but will is a thing we experience. We'll get to that later. So what we do is we address all the harm. We say you're going to be traumatized from having to pull the lever. Or even in the fat man example where you got to push the guy off the bridge. We say, listen, we know it's hard, but the right thing to do is to push the guy. And we know it sucks to be the guy who got pushed, but the right thing to do was to take the push. And once we acknowledge that every angle of this is fucked up, it creates a moral duty to stop situations like that from happening. Because there is no right or wrong answer. Once we get to the trolley, we're wrong. It's all wrong. Once we get to the pushing the guy off the bridge, it is all wrong. That's the difference. We don't believe that choices come down to moments like that. We believe choices are made up of deterministic waves, and you can control those waves to the best of your ability. If you don't want killers and criminals and robbers in your society, you need to build strong societies that give people things so they don't feel the need to rob. Just punishing people doesn't help, okay? I mean, you could go on and on and on. This video is not to fully break down deterministic morality. It's to compare. But you could go on and on. This applies to the real world, okay? That's the difference. We're not carrying baggage. We're asking, what can we do to apply to the real world so the fact that experiencing beings think pain sucks, we can stop having more pain. And you could just say, well, what if they want to cause damage in society? What if that's the thing they subjectively want? Yes, psychopaths and assholes exist. We agree. Even in objective moral systems, psychopaths and assholes exist. What we're saying is, if what you want is to hurt other experiencing beings, that makes you fucked up and we should stop you. So yes, you could just say, well, what if there's no objective moral code? Why can't I just go kick a baby? Yeah, why can't you? You can, and we're gonna punish you because rational beings think that's fucked up based on our intersubjective experience. Okay, so we're just saying drop the objective baggage, because that gives people an outlet to say, oh, I made a right or wrong decision in the moment. No, you carry responsibility for the developing situations that lead to moral decisions. All right. That creates duty through societal pressure. We know this because studies done on shame and stealing, we know it's not objective moral code that keeps people from doing things. It's generally societal norms, okay? And societal pressures. And like, that's a whole other thing you could get into, and I understand there's nuance in that topic. Okay. But that doesn't change the fact that we all know shame changes social environments. Shame is essentially the opposite of duty. Okay? You feel shame for not upholding your duty, to be honest, to be caring, to lift others, to be strong for yourself so you can be strong for others. That creates duty. And by saying there's a moral right or wrong and everything comes down to these single point decisions, we eliminate people's ability to take charge of their lives and say, no, I have a duty now. We live in a persistent present moment. The future is theoretical. What used to make up the past is making up the present. There's no timeline. You either exist or you don't. And if you exist, you're responsible right now for your moral decisions and the person you are. Okay? Take hold of your experience. Now, let's go to Sam Harris. And again, we're just summarizing here. I have a deep respect for Sam Harris and TJump. I've spent a lot of hours watching their stuff, as I'm sure a lot of people have. Anyways, enough glazing. Harris, pain can be measured. Measurements are objective. So we can have objective moral laws. Thus, get oughts from is by using the experience of pain or not the, I'm sorry, not using the experience of pain, using the measurement of pain. But that measurement is just filtered through experience. The measurement means nothing because we can measure damage to a rock. I can hit a human in the head with a rock, and we can measure the states that say there's damage there, but what makes it bad is that there's an interpreting mind to say that is bad. And if it's a brain dead person, it's still immoral. Why? Because you have a third party interpreting mind. If there's nobody around to see it, if a brain dead person gets hit by a rock and no one's around to see it, and there again, brain dead person, you got the baggage of that person could have had a mind. So just say a sack of a body that has never had a single thought ever and never will. Then does morality arise? Like if you just exist as a rock, there's no life inside of you, life meaning experience, then is there morality there? Like I agree with Sam Harris so much. We use the subjective experience, what he's calling objective facts based in pain, I'm calling subjective experience, okay? I think it all falls back. And so we don't disagree on how to build better societies. We agree there's a better and worse society. We just disagree on whether those societies are carrying objective moral weight or it just boils down to subjective experience, okay? And the problem is we want to move societies to create moral duty, and you create moral duty through understanding what you're doing. And indifference due to on-off morality and not using this causal responsibility and causal compassion and understanding the deterministic way life unfolds, by doing that, we allow indifference to creep in because people go, well, I can't do anything about eating meat, or I can't do anything about what's happening over, like, to the children overseas, or I can't even do anything about the homeless people in my own city because we think it boils down to this one big decision. No. Look, you do what you can. Show up and give out sandwiches. Somebody will see that and give change next time they see another guy. Somebody will see that. This is an age-old concept that actually works. But because we hide it behind the subjective morality, we can't use it to drive societal systems and to look at people who are ruling over us and subjugating us and say, hey, this is wrong, not for some moral objective reason, but because it's not right to subjugate, exploit, and take from us just so a very few people can gain. And not right here doesn't mean objectively wrong. It means it hurts more experiencing beings. Just like cutting off people's arms is worse than not cutting off people's arms. Not because an objective moral law in the universe that says having arms is better than not having arms, but because experiencing beings think not having arms sucks. Okay? I hope that's clear. The physical reality of pain and preference objectively exist, but the interpretation makes it moral or not. Rock hits rock, causes physical damage. No interpreter, no moral judgment. Only factual damage. The rock lacks preference, thus no moral judgment. Okay? And I'm sure people are going to have counters and rebuttals to that. I encourage you, though, to fully understand existential logicism and what it's doing. And the point of existential logicism is to drop metaphysical baggage. We get it. There may be truths you can never know. There's entire studies, there's entire fields of study dedicated to the fact that there are things we can't know about certain systems. Gödel's Incompleteness Theorems, I think that's his name. I'm not good with the names and pronunciations and stuff. But the Incompleteness Theorem is essentially hitting on that fact. But now, so we understand there's these metaphysical questions that may never be able to answer, that we may never be able to answer. Existential logicism doesn't care. We want to know, how can we take responsibility for our lives? Through understanding that everything boils down to experience. That experience unfolds in a subjective way through a deterministic wave. Our interpretation is what makes it special. We're not just computers. That's what, then we get into AI there. Be careful, we can get into AI real quick there. But that's what makes it special. So the idea is it doesn't matter that there's metaphysical questions we can't answer, or that we may never absolutely have absolute knowledge. We know existing beings are here, because we know experiencing beings are here, because to deny experience is to affirm experience, as I pointed out earlier. And that's enough. Like, we know those experiencing beings don't like pain. That's enough. That's what I'm saying. We don't need to have absolute knowledge about the entire world. We just need to understand what we can, and we can build from that. And that's the core tenet of existential logicism. I raised my daughter non-religious. We were atheist people because religions didn't make sense. You read history, you read philosophy, you read religion, you realize, oh, it's all just a bunch of dudes trying to describe shit. And a lot of it comes down to people trying to control and manipulate and get their idea across so they can get ahead in a certain way. And so, but the question becomes, I mean, because you're playing for souls, right? You're playing for keeps at that point. Once you're talking metaphysics and religion and the meaning of life and stuff. And so you start asking, well, science says time travel and paradox and infinite regress, and people are just now saying, oh, the Big Bang isn't from nothing. Like, and I know people have been saying that for a long time, but it's just now really catching on. I'm seeing people in debates go like, no, yeah, we don't have to in science carry metaphysical baggage, rather than just say, well, it's just as good as religion and we're positing less things. Okay? I believe it's a better way to live, because I think when you die, the best way to feel peace when you die is to know you did everything you can when you're here. And the only way to know you did everything you can when you're here is to understand the deterministic wave you live within, and to prioritize the things you actually care about, and make a concerted effort in the persistent present moment to become that person and do those things. Okay? Now my diatribe is over. TJump. Moral law arises from the involuntary imposition of will. That's the moral law, in essence. But will is totally subjective. It is not free. Free will does not exist. Because either things are random, which is not free will either, or things are caused and determined, and then will is not free. As I said, epistemic refutation paradox. Will exists. It's a thing we experience. You cannot dismiss it. But it is not free. It feels free because it comes from within a contained wave. You are the wave-particle duality. You are a point in space, but also made of a wave of different causes. Stay outside, Drilly boy. Hold on, we gotta clean you up. So now, the other problem with this is minds can be manipulated. Your will can be manipulated. By environment, you can never actually have a chance to have a will that's your own. And out of malice, somebody could trick you into thinking you have your own will. See subjugated societies who think they have a vote. Do you think your vote matters? Are you an American and you think your vote matters? That's funny. Now, you might say that manipulation is an imposition of will. That person doesn't really want that thing because they've been manipulated. Well, who says that? Because once you start making third-party judgments about a situation like that, welcome to subjective interpretation. I'm sorry. I'm starting to, seize up here. Welcome to subjective interpretation. Because you're now making a moral value judgment about somebody else's perspective. That's the point. It's not that I disagree that imposing on will is hitting on a core thing that we shouldn't do. It speaks to what the experiencing being really feels. We feel a will, we feel a will, and we don't want that imposed on. Agreed. That's not an objective moral law, though. it still only exists within our minds. Now, oh my goodness, we're almost there. If you say that's not the actual will, welcome to subjective judgment. Subjective observer experience-based moral judgments, okay? The other problem is you need a perfect world with force fields and alternate dimensions to make this objective moral truth be a reality. So it's purely metaphysical, and thus, according to existential logicism, I don't believe it's useful. Okay? It's not that I disagree with the conclusions, it's that I think connecting it to objective moral law gives people an excuse and an out. Accept the responsibility. We have a responsibility. Do you know factory farming is bad? Okay, then you're not evil for eating meat. But the same way you can tell a serial killer by the way he treats animals, you can tell serial killer fucked up, immoral, experience hating societies by the way we treat animals also. If we know pigs hate being slaughtered, and we know it's a disgusting practice, and we are indifferent to it, that doesn't make us objectively evil. It makes us broken. It makes us more capable of harming humans and being subjugated ourselves. That's the problem. So what we do is we don't say, and I'm going to do a whole video on name that trait where I agree and where I think it has a problem, because name that trait and the spectrum of consciousness within existential logicism, like name that trait is hitting on a point, it's bringing it to a very focused point, what spectrum of consciousness is all about. Okay? Name that trait is essentially boiling that down, but I think it's missing a little bit. But so that's the thing, is you don't say people are objectively wrong and you're evil for eating meat. You inform society that these things are having experiences. Those experiences are bad. You don't want bad experiences, so you shouldn't want other creatures to have bad experiences. Does that mean you can change everything today about yourself, about society, about factory farming, and about nutrition? No, but it means you have to start feeling moral weight. And in societies, we don't just say, oh, I don't think it's right, or I don't think it's wrong. No, we say, hey, whether you think it's right or wrong, we should try to not harm experiencing beings. Whether that means we grow meat that never had a brain, or we find other nutritional solutions. The idea is you don't demonize people, you wake people up, so then when you create off-ramps, they are willing to take them. Because will exists and societal wills exist based on these intersubjective experiences. And much like evolution, I mean, societies are evolved. And evolution isn't to give you the best outcome. Evolution doesn't always create the best or most perfect outcome. It's just the outcome you got based on the environmental factors. Okay? So now, let's see where we're at. So that's the problem, is you need a perfect world for TJump's moral view to really exist. Existential logicism says no moral law has ever been discovered, and all the evidence you could use to support a moral law, deterministic moral forces accounts for in a better way. Through evolution, experience, in existential logicism, imposing on will is imposing on being. And experiencing beings don't like that. And that's bad. So we agree. We just disagree that it's subjective. And so I guess the entire point here is just to kind of show what existential logicism is doing, and how I'm trying to kind of leave metaphysical questions behind and answer questions in reality. Because I think that's where we can inform people, create awareness, and change people's subjective experience to the point we want to express that in the form of duty, okay? So there's no on-off, right or wrong. There's only the fact that doing certain things creates certain outcomes, And the more people who do certain things creates larger societal outcomes. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was fun. In a lot of ways, this is just to help me kind of get more used to being on camera. I'm not going to edit any of this because I don't care about, like, this isn't about production value or like trying to monetize videos. This is about getting ideas out and trying to just, I don't know, just move conversations and try to gain new perspectives and stuff. And so if you see an issue with these, then like leave it in the comments, and maybe if there's a few comments at least, I'll come back and I'll do another video and I'll answer those. Answering individual comments can be a lot because it can be time consuming, like especially because I don't do a lot of like social engagement anyways, but I do try to answer in the comments, and I genuinely appreciate everybody who's been supportive and who like understands what I'm doing, and who, like, I'm not some crazy guy like trying to convince you of some fucking like deeper principle. I'm just trying to give you facts that can help your life, because this is how I raised my daughter, in a present moment deterministic view of the world, where we say, yeah, math points to paradoxes, but those paradoxes aren't reality, because math is a language. It's a translation of reality. And the same thing for religion. It's a translation of this larger reality with control mechanisms for humans baked in. And so the ultimate thing I'd like to address, like as humanity, is the fact that we have been selectively bred to serve. That's what our mindset has been selected for. Like, and so at some point we have to create enough societal weight through generations that we reject subjugation. Because right now we're just born into this inherent acceptance. Even American society